Hey guys, welcome to our family board meetings video series. A lot has happened since we first started this craziness when we released the family board meeting back in 2015. We wrote the book simply because people pushed us to, because this simple strategy was helping so many families in a way that it helped ours. And we didn't expect it, honestly, to have the following it had. But by getting the word out there and by entrepreneurs actually getting behind the book and sharing it not only with their own families, but their key employees, their subcontractors. Oh, I kind of messed that up.
You want to start over?
Yeah, I'll start over.
Okay. Roll.
Hey guys, welcome to our family board meetings video series. It's crazy because a lot has happened since this all started really back in 2015 when we decided to release our first version of the family board meeting. I honestly didn't even want to write the book, but so many people had pushed us to do it because they had gotten results with this simple strategy I'd shared and the stories that I'd had with my own family, that it began to spread. And the entrepreneurs we worked with, they shared it with their key employees. They shared it with their subcontractors, with their friends, with their families. And surely it just got a underground swell of support. And it was helping with something that was a major issue, a distraction for everyone and a concern for everyone. And it was this disconnection that was happening between supposedly successful entrepreneurs and their lack of relationship at home. And I've said so many times, there doesn't have to be success in business and failure at home. You can have success in business and success at home. And our little rhythm was a starting point to start to repair a lot of home relationships, a lot of bonds that might have been frayed, and also just make it a stronger family as a whole. Again, we didn't expect to have this, and we thought it would just be for entrepreneurs, but what we found, this connection that we look for with our children especially, is for everyone. Whether they're doctors, carpenters, bakers, it didn't matter, pro athletes. What we found was everyone vibed for this. We all work hard. We all are dedicated to our careers no matter what they are. And we want to provide for our family. But how do we really connect with our family besides just providing for them? And our simple board meeting strategy was one of the best ways people said that gave them the starting point. And that's what we want to do here. Let's get you a starting point. This is not going to get you all the way there, but it's going to give you a foundation that you're going to be able to grow off of. Now, some of you might call it a daddy-daughter date or a father-son time, mother-son time. It doesn't matter to us what you call it. I started calling it a board meeting years ago because I considered it an important meeting with my kids. I'm also a surfer, so I like the play on words of a board meeting. But whatever you call it doesn't matter, because the fundamental principles of this simple strategy will absolutely change your family life. And the principles will be able to spill into other relations you have, not just with your children, but with your spouse, with your parents, with other people of great importance to you. So hang on, we're going to start to go into a couple of things that I think are going to make a huge difference. Sit back. Again, this is not going to be like drinking out of an open fire hydrant. I want to take the information and digest it slowly so that first of all you understand it, it's easy to buy into, and most importantly, you're able to apply it. But before we do that, let me start with a story that I call Someday Never Comes. So I'm going to stop there because I'm going to do the next part. I don't know if...
Rolling.
Let me tell you the story of Someday Never Comes. So many years ago, actually, no, let me start over. How many years ago was it? I feel like that had been a long time ago. Okay.
Rolling.
So Someday Never Comes. It's a simple story that happened about a decade before this book even came to fruition. And I left the house one morning and I actually was going to support a friend. No, let me start over. I don't like the feel of that. So let me tell you the story that I call Someday Never Comes. About a decade before this book even came to fruition, I ended up going to, Let me tell you the story I call Someday Never Comes. It was about a... Let me tell you the story about Someday Never Comes. A decade before this book even started to come to fruition, I ended up going on a very interesting journey. You see, I was invited by a friend to attend a detox clinic where unfortunately they were struggling from addiction, and it was a time where the families got to come in and support the person that was going through recovery. I was the only non-parent in the room. But something interesting happened that day. What I found out was something that I had to really listen to, because it's not a lesson that I expected to have, but it's definitely what brought me here almost 15 years later in front of the camera with the message and the strategy that I share with you. So in this meeting that day, when people were going through a lot of pain, there became something very clear. And it's although these people were very hardworking, there had been a lack of connection through the growing years with their family, especially their children. As they were building their businesses, they didn't have the quality time at home that is so important to make sure that things stay grounded, that our children can turn to us for advice instead of their friends or the internet. In fact, it was taught to me that day that the opposite of addiction is connection, and a lot of families are missing it. So I sat in the room and I found out a couple of things very interesting. First, every person in the room of this small group of the parents was a successful entrepreneur. Now that scared me because I was already an entrepreneur at that time, not of starting my own family yet, but a path that I didn't want to take my family down because I could see the pain these people were going through. And when you see a grown man who is held in high stature in the community and has a successful business, but he's looking at a picture of his 5-year-old daughter and she's now 17 and he barely recognizes her, it changes you for the better. At least it changed me for the better. And what we all discovered in that room that day was, although they had the best intentions, that they wanted to provide for their family, they were missing that valid quality time along the way. And what they would say to themselves is, someday I'll make this up to my family. Someday they'll understand the hard work I'm putting in for the business. The problem is, kids don't understand, and someday never comes. It comes too late. And the replacement of quality time can never come by the replacement and providing of money. There has to be an equilibrium, an integration. And that's what I left there that day with. And in my journal that day, I wrote one thing, and I wrote, there is no substitute for quality time. But how do we harness the power of quality time? I was already working with families on small retreats and getting to have a lot of interaction, but I really started to focus on how do we make sure that it's easy to use, that it can be repeated, that it stays consistent. There is no substitute for quality time. How do we harness its power? That's what we're going to talk about today. Because none of us out there want to be in that position where we say, what did we do wrong? Someday I thought they would understand. Someday I thought this would help. I thought that by being able to build this big business and being able to pay for the rehabilitation center, that it would make everything right. It doesn't. But the good news is, by working with thousands of families now, I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be that way. Someday can start today. And you can have that growing success if we set certain rhythms. And we're going to start with that rhythm today of the family board meeting strategy so that you won't have to be in that room or see the things that I saw that day or go through the pain that I saw families go through. So next thing we're going to go through is the introduction of rhythms. Okay, the most important question in the world. Before I give you that question, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Something's happening in today's society. We're busier than ever. See, it used to be maybe 20, 30 years ago when you had a business, you had a job, you would work hard, you'd be able to go home and have some separation. But it seems today, namely because of the technology that's supposed to help us have more freedoms, we're always on. We're never getting away from work, and it doesn't matter what we do. They're all taking more of our time. And the most important thing I've found is quality time. And quality time cannot happen when we're always on. And the thing that a lot of us don't even realize is there is a big difference. And this distinction is absolutely key, so you'll want to pay attention. There is a difference between time and quality time. And I've had scores of people say to me, well, come on, Jim. I take the kids to soccer and to gymnastics. We spend some time watching TV after their homework's done. And what I tell you is those moments are important. But again, there's a difference between time and quality time. And with technology today, we might say, I'm able to drive my kids to and from school because I can take the call or the text at the traffic lights. And they're in there with their friends. That's not quality time. You might even be able to, because of your success, take a fancier vacation. But if you're always connected and on at work, even though you're away on vacation, that's not quality time. And what I've found is there's some simple components of quality time that aren't included in everyday life, that don't happen at the busy breakfast table every morning where someone's trying to do this, yelling at that, running out the door. That's not quality time. And what we're trying to do is create the space, those pillars in your relationship where there is actually quality time spent. So an important question that I have for you, before I give you the most important question you'll ever ask, is when was the last time you spent a half a day or a day with your child with no electronics on, having meaningful conversation, and doing something fun of their choice? Sadly, a lot of people aren't able to name a single time. And when I start to give the definition and fundamentals of what is actually quality time when we're trying to deepen our closest relationships, so many people found that they are having passing time, but not quality time. And quality time, again, is the main ingredient that I always talk about to first and foremost strengthen relationships. Always remember that. The opposite of addiction is connection. And how is connection formed? Normally through quality time. So ask yourself this question, the most important question you've ever asked. Which is more important, your work or your family? Now, when you put it that clearly, so many people will jump to say, oh, of course, my family, my family. But there's something I learned years ago in a leadership group called the congruency gap. And see, there is a congruency gap in a lot of things we say and what we do. We might say that our family's the most important, but what we actually do could be completely different. And when you start to look back and reflect about the time you spend, do you actually spend quality time?
Grab it.
Whoa!
Rolling.
And when you put it that clearly, so many people right away will say, well, of course, my family. I used to do the same. But I went to a leadership program years ago and learned something called the congruency gap, where the congruency gap is sometimes the things we say are different than the things we do. We might claim that our highest value is family, but when you look at what we actually do, there's a gap between what our value is and how we actually behave, our actions that we take. And so many of us, without even knowing it, have a congruency gap. We say our family is most important, but the actions we take show very differently. And the one thing I've learned is the man or the woman that does not spend quality time with their family is leaving out one of the most important components to being a successful parent, to having life below the surface with your kids, and having an overall long-term relationship. Because the pinnacle years, as you know, our company being called 18 Summers, are those first 18 years where you will spend 85% of the estimated time you ever have with your kids in those first 18 summers. So that's why we look at this so importantly, to ask that question to yourself. A lot of you have never been put to the question like this. Which is more important, your work or your family? And before you answer it, think of the congruency gap. Are the actions you're taking supporting that your family's more important, or are they supporting that your work are more important? Now, the first thing I want to remind you is, this is not to beat you up. We all have enough challenges and struggles in our career. The hard work we're doing is with the best intentions, so don't beat yourself up. The second thing I can tell you is, if there is a gap, like I had years ago, between what you actually say and what you do, that work is actually showing through my actions to be more important than my family, that's okay. It can change. And the starting point is with this simple family board meeting strategy. I'm going to stop there for a minute because I'm trying to remember where to go.
Rolling.
So hear me clear on this. Don't beat yourself up. I've interviewed thousands of entrepreneurs and professionals out there, and when they feel like they're not spending that quality time with their family, when they ask that most important question and they realize that maybe their actions are showing that work has been more important than family, they end up feeling guilty and depressed. Guilt and depression will not serve you. We need to work through those emotions and start to take action steps to reverse that. And it starts right now.
You want to start that over?
No, is that one okay or not?
Yeah,
really?
that was that short one. And we're gonna and rolling.
And how do you start right now? You guys are going to be a part of what so many other families have joined us on, and that's called the Quality Time Revolution. So stay tuned to go over that.
Okay. Move to your left a little bit. Okay, back a little bit. No, forward. And then just right. Shoot back at the six. Okay, good. Rolling.
And how do you do this? The first step is you guys are going to join us with the way, I'll start again. And the way that you're going to make this happen is you are going to join us and other families in what we call the Quality Time Revolution. That's the starting point. And we don't want to bring guilt and depression into this. See, the reason I know this is I've interviewed thousands of entrepreneurs and professionals now. And when they feel disconnected from their family, most of them say two emotions, guilt and depression. Neither one of them serve a purpose right now. We're going to start from today and move forward. You guys have had the best intentions. We've all messed up, but with some simple rhythms and things we're going to go over, you can change that. Not next week, not a month from now, but starting today. Now, what I want you to remember too is when you ask that important question and sit there and ask that question and think of the congruency gap. Are the actions matching what you claim to be your highest value? Don't beat yourself up, but also ask yourself about the technology. Technology is so important for the things that we work and the things we do, the way I'm able to get this video to you. But we have to be able to disconnect to reconnect, which will be a major theme of what we do. I call it intermittent tech fasting, and we'll be going over that. But know that although your phone or your laptop is supposed to be giving you more freedom, we have to make sure that we put it in compartments, because if we let it run over us, then we will never have true quality time with our family. Let's go over, shit, I fucked that up. Was that too much, hon? Because I'm reading the chat. All right. And how's this going to happen? I'm going to ask you to join us and a lot of other families that are a part of our program now. And, oh shit, okay. And how does this work? Fuck. I know, okay. I only had 1 cup of coffee. And how do you make this happen? Well, what I'm going to invite you to do is join us and a lot of other families that are a part of what we call the Quality Time Revolution. This is going to help get that congruency gap to disappear. By setting some of these principles in motion, you can confidently say, my biggest priority is myself and my family, and your actions are going to match that. The board meeting strategy is the best starting point I've found because the principles will bleed over into other areas of your life. And I think by asking yourself this question, it's going to give you a certain freedom. You're going to know where you stand, so that way we can move you forward. You also hopefully have an understanding now that the technology that assists us in having more freedoms can sometimes be a little much. And we want to make sure that we put that under control. So here we go, being a part of the Quality Time Revolution. Okay. Why the board meeting strategy works. Now, there's different things that we have in our life, and once we understand the principles, it's very easy to buy into and say, I understand why this works, I'm going to do it. So I wanted to explain to you the 7 reasons, the 7 principles that we found that fundamentally ground our strategy and give the results it has. Because people go, gosh, we've heard so many amazing stories about families just having such great results. And the secret is, we just clinged on and brought together some very powerful fundamentals and principles that make it work. So let me go through with the, damn it.
We just clinged on to some very basic fundamentals.
We just clinged on to some very basic fundamentals and principles and put them together for the results that we get. And let me explain what those principles are. The first principle is scheduling. There's an old saying, that which we schedule gets done. I want you to imagine that you own a business. You get a phone call and Warren Buffett says, I would like to meet with you to talk about buying your business. Now, Warren leaves it up to you to set the appointment. Are you going to set your appointment? The answer is absolutely yes if you'd like to sell your business and learn from someone great. See, I find my children to be just as important as a Warren Buffett or anyone else. So I know the quality time is important. I need to schedule that time with them. A few people have said to me, gosh, that seems very impersonal. Well, okay.
A few people said to me.
Okay. Some people say to me, oh, it seems very impersonal. Impersonal.
It sounded right.
Okay. Now, some people say to me, wow, it sounds very impersonal to actually set a schedule to get together with your kids. And I always say, that which we schedule gets done. As you know, I set it in my head long time ago to keep me in my best self that my children and my wife are my most important investors and clients, more important than anyone else in my business. And by doing that, I would never not schedule time with my biggest investors, my most important clients, or Warren Buffett if he wanted to buy my business. So that which we schedule gets done. I always have my next board meeting appointment, my next meeting with each of my kids on the calendar. You have 90 days between each one. And schedules fill up quick. Again, we're busy. But if you block that on your calendar, actually put it on your calendar, and if you don't handle your own schedule and you have an assistant that does, they put it on your calendar. It makes all the difference. This number one principle is why it works. It's also the number one reason why it doesn't work. If you schedule this time, it's going to happen. If you don't, it probably won't. So remember, principle number one of why this works, schedule it. Put it on this calendar. It will work. Principle number two, repetition. And what I mean by repetition, I set these board meetings for every 90 days. Now, why do we do 90 days? Well, So why do we do 90 days? The reason I do want 90 days is a lot of personal development groups and other science has been showing that there is a magic number for those 90 days to be able to set certain benchmarks, set certain goals, and 90 days gives a good amount of time between each of your board meetings. So one builds off the other. Pause it right there. Remember what the rest was.
You don't want me to just shout it out to you and tell you what it's about, and then you do it.
I don't know if that'll work. We could try.
So you got to pick that up from the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now, principle number two, repetition. See, the power of repetition comes in the 90 days, and a lot of science and personal development groups have shown that 90-day breakthrough programs give the best results. And by setting an appointment, a board meeting every 90 days with your kids, you're getting into this repetition of serving deep quality time with them consistently. So we need to get into this repetition, and once you do, it starts to build one off the other, off the other, off the other. Repetition goes from months to years. I'm now in almost my 9th year with my sons. And that repetition has been one of the most grounding things that we've had. So principle number two is repetition. Get in that repetition of 90 days, and having that repetition brings you deeper, brings you stronger, and keeps you on track. Now, principle number three, anticipation. The power of anticipation is incredible for building relationships and bringing people closer. We all anticipate certain things, like a vacation. Have you ever planned a vacation with your family and then gone on it? Of course, that vacation was probably incredible, great moments. But half of the fun was the anticipation, was planning the vacation together. And if you've never planned a vacation with your kids' involvement, I recommend you do, because it changes the experience totally. And that anticipation, that building and designing of the event that's going to happen is a powerful principle that gets this day to be even more special once it happens. And having anticipation will get them more excitement, to get them more buy-in. And when it comes to forming memories, long-term memories, your children will actually remember these moments of the board meeting even deeper because of that simple principle of anticipation. I'm going to pause there because I don't know what else there is. Okay, so yeah. Now, anticipation works in lots of different ways. Once a year you might celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah, or once a year you celebrate a birthday. Now, what I found for relationship building and being close with our children, we don't want to anticipate out a year. Now, those things are great. Those holidays or that birthday are great. But what I've found with my children, to get the most involvement, excitement, this 90-day anticipation is absolutely key. I don't want to go a full year to wait for that. And I found that 90 days, again, builds up the anticipation of planning, the specialness of the day, in order to get the best results, the most buy-in, the most connection. So remember that when you're looking at this. Birthdays are great, holidays are great, but we want to do this more than once a year. We also don't want to do it necessarily once a week. Now, I'm not encouraging you not to spend quality time with your kids, obviously, and I spend as much as I can. But what I found when I do these one-on-one without electronics in a day of their choice and space them out 90 days, the day is not white noise. It really rises to the top of importance and remembrance, and that's what we want to form here, these special days. And that 90 days gives that anticipation that's going to make the day even more special for you. So remember, principle number 3 is anticipation. Setting them 90 days will bring up the principle of anticipation to make that day even more special. So,
Just freeze right there. Shoot.
so remember, principle number 3, anticipation. If you set those 90 days, it's going to make it more special, more fun, more connected. Just by following this principle, it will work for you.
Wrong.
Now, principle number 4, reflection. See, we just talked about anticipation, but the absolute beauty of our board meetings, our strategy, is anticipation and reflection. Now, when you wake up these 2 principles, they work absolute magic for making this day even more special. As you're working through anticipation, building up to it, remember, your child will also be having a reflecting off their last board meeting 90 days ago. So when they're reflecting about how fun that last board meeting was, the things that they had done, the things that they had thought about that day to say, ooh, I know what I want to do next when I have this day to myself with my mother or father, their phones are going to be off and I get to design the day, they'll be reflecting off how fun the last board meeting was. So you put those 2 things of anticipation and reflection into the works. Again, reflection works good at 90 days. Kids' lives move pretty quick. And if you're as ADD as I was, it moves extra quick. So what I encourage you to do is tap into that power of reflection. Your children will naturally do it. And by setting that schedule of 90 days, it was only a few months ago. Again, if you want a year, and we're only doing this once a year, it wouldn't necessarily be easy to remember. And if you're doing it every week, it's not going to again have that specialty because there was no anticipation. So again, this 90 days of anticipation, reflection. Now by setting this schedule, following the schedule of our board meeting strategy, you're bringing up reflection. They're thinking of that last day, and that last day will not only get them more excited for what comes ahead, but it'll also give them ideas of what they want to do for you in the next one. So reflection, again, is an important principle that once you follow our strategy is going to be working for you and making this time with your child even more special.
There you go.
Now, principle number 5, decompression. The dictionary says that the definition of decompression is relieving pressure. Now, that's such an important thing when we're building deeper relationships with the people we love. And decompression doesn't occur quickly, and it doesn't happen in hurried moments. So you're not normally in a state of decompression when you're rushing around the breakfast table, the dog is barking, a kid is screaming, you're asking to do this homework, taking this text. That doesn't create decompression. What creates decompression is the space we create and the time that we give it. So when I go on a board meeting with my kids, I might leave and then for the first half hour or so feel a little on edge, a little worked up sometimes. But what happens throughout the day is decompression occurs. You release that pressure. Your phone's not on. You're doing something fun. You're focusing on a relationship that's important. And when you give that space of at least 4 hours, decompression has time to actually happen. And that is so key because what I've learned is true communication, true connection, true conversation does not happen when you're not decompressed. So you need this space, which our board meeting strategy does, to actually have time, to have a phone that's not bothering you, to decompress. Because what happens at that time is the lines of communication usually naturally open up. And that's what this is all about, having fun and be able to connect on a deeper level with the people that you love. So this principle number 5 of decompression is absolutely key. By following our simple framework and strategy, it's going to set you up for decompression. Not only you, but your teenager as well. Remember, there's no electronics coming with us on this board meeting. So there's not going to be that text or that tweet or that little game that they're playing. You're in full focus, having a good time together, and by doing that, decompression occurs. And it's one of the best ways. It's one of the ways that when I'm in a state of decompression with my sons or my daughter, they actually open up to me. They actually talk to me. We actually have very memorable moments, and that's what it's about. So plug into this one. You will by using it. Principle number 5, decompression. Is that okay? Okay, principle number 6, magnifying glass effect. Now, I want you to imagine a giant magnifying glass. We used to do it to to set things on fire and to look at things in science class, a giant magnifying glass. It puts a magnifying effect on something, right? With our board meeting strategy, we're trying to put the magnifying glass on the relationship you have with each of your children in a positive way. What happens, what I've found, and so many others have found, when you follow our strategy of one-on-one, without electronics, doing a fun activity of their choice with time to talk at the end, this sets you up to put the magnifying glass over this individual relationship. Again, if you come from a big family and you're never one-on-one with each of your children or your spouse, you're never really getting the chance to put the magnifying glass over the relationship. And once you put the magnifying glass over the relationship, you can see where there's good. You can see where there's things that need to be improved. You can actually focus on it and see it more clearly. You're going to have that opportunity with each one of your children when you're setting these 90-day rhythms to have a board meeting with each one of them. You'll plug into what I call the positive magnifying glass effect. You're going to put it on the relationship. If you're a guy and you're the one who is the tall, dark, silent, don't talk to your kids type, that's fine. But now you got to come out of your shell. If your wife normally does all the talking, she's not going to be on the board meeting with you. You need to do the talking. You need to talk to your son or daughter. And that's a good thing because it pulls you out of your shell and it gives you true communication that I guarantee they're looking for. So remember, the magnifying glass approach will happen when you follow our secret framework. And this principle alone, by putting that over the relationship, is one of the most incredible ways that I've seen so many families deepen and strengthen just by following it. So principle number 6, by following our strategy, you will be plugging in to the magnifying glass effect and getting a deeper relationship as a result. Is that okay? Or principle number 7, probably the most important, our final principle of why our board meeting strategy works. And the principle for this is simplicity. See, so many people have told me, why didn't I think of this? Why didn't I think of this? Because our strategy is so easy to understand and apply and continue to consistently put in your life for years and years and see results and enjoy, that it's simple, it's easy to buy into, and there's not a lot of complication. What I found, and I love good education, I go to lots of entrepreneurial events, personal development events, but a lot of us are choking on content and starving for execution. We'll go and learn something that sounds incredible, but it might be a little confusing, we might not understand it, it might be hard to keep applying, and what happens? We might try it once or twice, or for a few weeks it fades and we never use it again. I don't want you choking on content and starving for execution. We want you to have consistent, real results that help you with your family for the long term. That's the beauty of this family board meeting strategy, because it's simple. The power of simplicity keeps you buying in, keeps your family buying in, keeps you executing, and keeps you getting results. So I think you're going to be very pleasantly surprised to see that of all the complications out there, we're not one of them. This one is very easy and very results oriented that start day one with the first board meeting that you do. So remember, by starting this strategy and staying with it, you're plugging into probably my favorite and the most important principle, and that's the principle of simplicity. Put it to practice. It's easy to buy into, easy to understand, easy to get results for, and easy to consistently do for years to come. Okay, a couple of common questions. The first one is, people say to me, now how old should my kids be to start doing these board meetings? Now the answer that I've come up with for the most part is 2.5. Now some of you are going, whoa, 2.5, that's way too young. I've found differently. Again, children vie for attention, for quality time. And a lot of time for the busy entrepreneur, the busy professional, our littlest ones who can't actually communicate clearly what they want, they're needing it the absolute most. So with a lot of people out there, including myself, I found that by the age of 2.5, I could piece together a board meeting. Yes, I might have to help them piece the day together by things that they've already been saying they want to do, and they might even fall asleep early. The board meetings I started doing with my daughter for the first year, she would usually fall asleep after about 3 hours. So we wouldn't even get to the 4-hour mark. But guess what? she talked about that time, and my wife would say, oh, she's talking about her daddy meeting. She's talking about her daddy meeting again. She looks forward to these, and she's now 4, and we've been doing them for a year and a half. So don't think that just because your children can't communicate exactly what they want, that they won't get results from it. So I would encourage any of you to do it up to the age, start at the age of 2 or 2.5 and see what happens, even if you have to shorten it. And going to the other side of things, if your children are over the age of 18 and out of the house, you should try to do 1 a year. Just 1 day a year where you're one-on-one without electronics, doing something fun together that they want to do and having time to talk. Game changer. So many families of grown children have written back to me and said, thank you for encouraging this one abridged version of doing 1 board meeting a year, because frankly, I can't do 1 a quarter. It's too much. They live across the country. But to make that flight once a year to them, to have just a day with just us one-on-one, has absolutely changed our relationships. We're having conversations we could never have at the giant Christmas party or this wedding or that. So I encourage you, start at the age of 2.5. And then if your kids are over the age of 18, try to do 1 a year. So a lot of people ask this question: how do I get started with the board meeting strategy? How do I introduce it to my kids? Let me tell you the way not to. Don't go up to your kids, especially a teen, and say, I just read a book on parenting and we're supposed to start spending time together every 90 days. Like, don't pitch it like that. Show a little salesmanship, because that's not going to get you what you want. What I've learned is, first off, with the younger kids, it's not hard to get them to buy in. Now, when my sons were 7 and 5 and I created these quality time coupons like I talked about, the first actual board meetings, which became the strategy, it wasn't taking much to get them to buy in. All I told them was an honest truth. I said, look, guys, I'm so blessed to have you in my life. I want to get to know you more. I want to have fun together, and I'm busy running these businesses, but I want you to stay my most important thing. Let's use these quality time coupons over the next year so we have that time. Now, you get to design the day. Anything you want to do within reason, anywhere you want to eat, we can go to. You put together the day, and I will be there. My phone's going to be off because I don't want it distracting us. I want to be focused on having a good time with you guys. That was it. It was very easy to buy in. Now, some of you say, great, that's fine for the little ones, but I have a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old. And they don't seem to like they want to do anything. They don't want to get off the computer or off the video games. I get it. So here's all I say to them. I've learned, especially teens, have a very good bullshit detector. And what I try to do is not work around that bullshit detector. I just look at kids straight in the face like I do my teens now. And again, they bought in early and said, look, these days are important to me. I'm not always going to be here. You're not always going to be here at the house. And I don't want these times to pass by where we don't have a chance to hang out together. And with my busyness, I don't want to forget what's important. So let's get together for a day. You guys choose. My phone's off, your phone's off. No catches, no lectures, nothing like that. I just want to have a good time and spend time with you while we still can, while you're still at home, while I'm still here healthy and happy. Because I know people that have lost their parents, and man, they would do anything to have a day like this. I'm that brutally honest. I've encouraged other people to be that brutally honest, and that gives them buy-in. Now, the buy-in also comes from letting them design the day. We already talked about this, so you guys know the importance of letting them design the day. We think we know everything as parents sometimes. What's most important? What they want to do. Let them design the day. Another clicker, which some people don't like, but I'm going to tell you anyway, is I let the kids miss school twice a year at least to be able to go on these board meetings. And I've had people say to me, well, isn't that irresponsible to allow your kids to play hooky from school for this? And I ask them, I say, listen, if in 50 years my children are interviewed and say, or do you think your father or mother were responsible to allow you to step out of school for the day where he played hooky from work, you played hooky from school, and you were able to have a fun day together of deep and meaningful conversation and connection, which do you think was more responsible? Every time the answer, when people put it in those terms, to do that day together, time is fleeting. I can get more done, and it's more important for my relationship than 1 day at work or 1 day at school, period. For me, I don't want the perfect attendance award at school or work. I want to have the best relationship I can with my kids. And I know with the busyness of schedule sometimes you have to play hooky. Because if you do this once a quarter and let's say twice a year, you played hooky from work and they played hooky from school, is it going to be that bad? Is it going to be that important? Where will you be in 50 years on your way out? Do you think your kids will regret that you pulled them out for that day, or you regret that you missed that day of school? Or do you think damn, I made the right decision. Remember, this time is fleeting. I express that so strongly. So don't overthink it. Be honest. Don't sell anything. Just tell them how you feel. This is all about connecting with the time we have and making the most of it. If you try to be honest with your kids, that's a starting point. It's not always going to work. They might not always be excited. But again, remember, our guard's up, their guard's up. Give it some time. Let them work with it. Okay, another common question. What do you do on these board meetings? Can you give me some examples of things you've done? Let me ramble off a couple of different things we've done. We've done days at the beach, surfing, fishing, baseball games, football games, Segway tours, museums, cooking classes, yoga classes, princess parties, skating, ice shows, ice skating shows. What else have we done? We've done, so maybe we'll stop it at ice skating shows.
We've done ice skating shows. Oh.
Okay.
No,
Then you
you
go.
didn't like end your sentence, so you should. Were you done with that part?
Okay, roll.
Horseback riding, hiking, photography classes, painting classes, pedicure, that was with my daughter, shopping, and holiday gift hunting. That sounded like I was special, didn't it?
That's a great thing, though. Holiday gift hunting. That's, yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
So just keep it there.
And service, don't forget service. Like you know, sometimes do service board meetings where you.
Playing in the park, story hour, helicopter rides. Jeez, there's so many.
Say all of them. You're gonna get people going.
Should I try to do a few more or no? Just leave it at that.
Well, you'll need to like finish your sentence. Do you know what I mean? Like.
Roll.
Laser tag, robotics class, mini golf, helicopter tours, so many things. Again, these are all things my kids came up with the ideas. I've heard of Pokemon classes. I've heard of fashion shows with different people. Again, let your child choose and go deep with whatever they want to do. That should give you some starting points. See what they're passionate about. They'll start to name it. Again, one thing that I am pretty serious about, and you can make the decision on it, is are they going to choose something that uses electronics? I try to stay away from electronics. I don't go to movies just because I think there's better things that can be done at that time.
Is there, okay, rolling.
Now, honestly, if your son or daughter wanted to go on a hike every time, that's fine. It doesn't always have to change the activity. It's about the connection. It's about the quality time that you guys are spending together. So don't get too wrapped up on the activity, especially if they choose the same thing over and over. My one son chose the lighthouse and Segway tours at least 3 or 4 times each. And that's fine with me because we're still getting the time together. Now, an important disclaimer, almost on every board meeting I've ever gone on, we share a meal together. I think there's something to breaking bread. They choose the place we want to go so that they have, again, that ownership. But sharing a meal together one-on-one is usually a great way, again, to encourage that decompression and to open up the lines of communication. So hopefully that list gets you started. But again, just ask your kids, what are some fun things you'd like to do? You can use these examples, and I'm sure some things are going to come up to start being able to enjoy this time together. Okay. A lot of people get concerned about this word focus reflection. It sounds so big and serious, but again, it's a major component of experiential education. And you guys are using experiential education now in a fun way to strengthen some of your most important relationships. So again, what you do with experiential education is you're going to do a fun activity of their choice and have a focus reflection at the end, which basically just means time to talk. Now, one of the key questions of experiential education that gets it started is, what was your favorite part of the day and why? That question has done wonders for myself and so many other people because it gives you the chance to hear what they have to say, but also for you to be vulnerable and say the thing that you might not feel comfortable saying. I can tell you when my kids first answered this and said to me, what is your favorite part of the day and why? And they would answer, and then they'd say, well, what about you? I would be able to open and honestly say, I just love seeing you guys laugh and have fun, and I cherish this time because I'm so busy and I don't want to miss these moments. There's no BS in this. They can see through you if you are, but it gives me the chance to say something that frankly is a little hard for me because that's not how it was brought up. to share those kind of emotions or feelings or words of connection. So, okay, I'll start that after so. What else can we ask besides what is our favorite part of the day and why? That's a great starting point. Here's a couple of things that I've found help. Giving a sincere compliment. A sincere compliment comes at this time where there's been decompression, you've shared a meal, had a fun day together. They will actually hear it. This is one of the ultimate times where if there's something you love and respect about each of your kids, that you say it to them right then and there. By giving a sincere compliment, they actually will grow closer to you. Another thing that works just as powerfully, probably even more powerfully, is a sincere apology. I can't tell you how many times as a dad I've messed up. Either losing my patience, not following through with something, not giving full understanding to something, not realizing how important something was to my sons or my daughter. And that's the time that it gives me the opportunity to give a sincere apology. So many of us, especially those fire red entrepreneurs that are more powerhouses, feel like we don't even have to apologize. We can sell our way out of it, or we can just avoid apologizing. Give this opportunity to give a sincere apology for your kids. One of the most common ones I've heard from divorced fathers that have come back on their board meeting is when they've actually been able to apologize for any stress they've gone through by a messy divorce. Now that is something that I couldn't imagine the children are experiencing what they're going through, but they said by being able to give this sincere apology of, I'm sorry if this has been hard on you, we didn't want you to put you through this, we do love you, it's really given a relaxation and a comfort to each of the kids. So that's just one example. Another example, and the final one I'll leave you at, is make sure you share stories. Now, not the long, boring ones where you were perfect, because we all know those aren't fun and they're probably not true. What I'd say is when I've shared stories of, let me start that again. What I've found is when I share stories of when I was younger or even as an adult of vulnerability, when I've messed up, those are very powerful. I try to counterbalance once in a while when I've done something right, when I've had a success. But what I've learned, so many of us put up this facade of Superman or Wonder Woman with our kids. They think that we're perfect, they're not, they can't relate. When I share stories of vulnerability, especially when I was a kid, wakes my kids right up. They see me as someone different. They see me as a human. They don't see me as that shift manager or parole officer. If you are willing to share stories of your youth, maybe they're funny, maybe they're vulnerable, maybe it is something that you overcame, but share them truthfully and see where it goes. Now, again, I'm just going to remind you, when you ask the focused reflection is not, and remember this, is not a chance to give 50 lectures. We've already gone over this. Do not give lectures. Ask questions, listen, and share. Okay, what are the most common pitfalls of why your board meeting strategy doesn't work? I get asked this all the time. And after years of research and collecting data and seeing my own successes and failures with the board meeting strategy, it's this. First, it's not scheduling. Again, that which we schedule gets done. If you don't schedule it, they probably won't ever happen. I've had so many people where once they actually took that action step of scheduling the board meeting, it actually happened. Did you see that light go down?
Yeah.
It went down like,
I didn't sit.
Okay, another question. What are the common pitfalls of why your board meeting strategy doesn't work? After years of my own successes and failures, my own data research from the thousands of people we work with, here it is. The first one, again, is not scheduling the activity. You gotta schedule it. If you put it on the schedule, it's almost guaranteed to happen. And if you don't, it's almost guaranteed not to happen. You have to treat this like your most important appointment, schedule it. Now the next thing is, let your child choose the activity. Again, I find out so many people have written to me and said, hey, I don't know if they're really buying in. And once I dig under and find the questions that need to be answered, I find that they're trying to pick the activity for their teens or their small kids. Don't do that. Let your child pick the activity. Even if it takes a little more longer to do it, you have to let them pick the activity. And the last, which I've brought up a few times, this is a time of fun. This is a time of connection. This is a time of memory, of conversation, real conversation. It's not a time to overparent. It's not a time to lecture. Don't do the 50 lecture series on a board meeting because the magnifying gets shattered. So make sure you schedule it, make sure that you let them pick the activity. And this is not a time for lecture. It's a time to listen, have real conversation, and connect.
Roll.
Okay, no, I forgot what the question was. Okay, I got it. Here we go. All right, another question. Does this strategy work for other relationships besides your children? And does it work with your spouse? The answer is absolutely yes. When you look at some of these fundamentals, again, we've built this on simple principles. They will translate over to other relationships. I know a lot of people, again, that do one board meeting a year with each of their parents now, with a close cousin, with a close friend, with a brother or a sister. I know people that have started to use this with their spouse. See, I actually do one similar with my spouse, but we do it once a week. We do date night with a question, which is one-on-one without electronics, something fun that we put together, and we ask each other a question. We call it date night with a question. It's a minimum of about 3 hours. I've found with my spouse, although we do try to do an overnight about once a quarter. Actually, I'm babbling now, aren't I? All right, a lot of people also ask this: does this strategy work with other relationships? And do you do these board meetings with your spouse? The answer is absolutely yes, they work with other relationships. When you look at the simplicity of the principles that we've put together, how could they not work with other relationships? We know people that now do these board meetings, maybe not once a quarter, but once a year with each of their parents, a close grandparent, a cousin, a brother or sister. They work for our closest, most important relationships. So feel free, please, to take these principles and add them to those other important relationships. And when it comes to my spouse, the answer is absolutely yes. One thing that I've learned very directly in all of the mentors that I've had, and even the reflections of my own life, the relationship with my wife is one of the most important, if not the most important relationship in my life. Napoleon Hill used to even talk about the importance of being in a mastermind, being in sync with your spouse. So my wife takes precedence over all of that, except for my own well-being, where I take care of myself on certain things. But yes, we do what's almost like a board meeting once a week. We do what we call date night with a question, where we take these principles of the board meeting strategy, one-on-one, without electronics, a fun activity with time to talk, and have added something to it. We call it date night with a question. So once a week, every Wednesday night from 5:30 to 8:30, we're on this date night, and we come up with one powerful question to ask each other, something to learn about each other and to be able to get to know each other so we don't stop dating. But to have that time once a week keeps us dating, keeps us grounded. And again, all we did was branch this off of the principles we learned from the family board meeting strategy. So the answer again is absolutely yes. I encourage you to take these principles with your spouse. I encourage them to do with the other close friends or family members that you have, because it will do wonders. But I encourage you this: start with your own children and branch it out from there.
Roll.
Common question as well. Won't this one-on-one time take away from the family dynamic? Again, just to reiterate, you have to separate the parts to strengthen the whole. So the answer is no. It will actually strengthen it. And if you're setting the rhythm where each one of your children, every time one has a board meeting, the other has a board meeting. One has a board meeting, one has a board meeting. They can't call out that you're not spending equal time together. So it's very important to drop this. We have to be together all the time. In fact, I encourage you to spend time with yourself, time with just you and your spouse, and time with each one of your children, and then time all together. That's the best way from all of the different families I've worked with, the ones that are the most grounded, the most confident, the ones that enjoy each other's company the most, have that combination. And that is what you want to do. So remember, do not take it as you're actually neglecting your other children. It won't take away the family dynamic. One-on-one time that is rhythmic and set up and fairly distributed between all of you will actually strengthen the family. And the last question people ask is, what else would you add? What else do you want to do? What else should we do to make these board meetings the most memorable, the most connected? Okay, this is something I like to do. I like to take a picture on every board meeting. I put my phone on airplane mode so that I'm not bothered, that I can't be on any sort of tech distraction. And then at one point in the board meeting, I pull out and take a few photos all together so I can commemorate that moment. I have pictures now of my son who is about this tall up to my hip and is about this high on me now. And that's pretty special to look back on those pictures. And it's been year booked almost through a decade. So what I like to do is commemorate that moment where I do two things. I like to take a picture, and then I also like to have a very short reflection written out. Where did we go? What did we do? What did we talk about? Or what was a major aha? Now, when you think about that just for a minute. You start doing these board meetings with your child at the age of 5, and they leave the house at the age of 19. And you have this yearbook of pictures of watching them grow, moments that you've had, reflections that you shared. This is their relationship yearbook to share forever. 60 years from now when you're gone, they're going to be able to look at that. Your grandkids are going to be able to look at that. They're going to remember things that they would have always forgotten, possibly from the age of 5, conversations you've had and moments that were commemorized. So I encourage you, I look this big with it, snap a commemorative photo of each board meeting and then write out a few words that will be able to bring the moment back right away. That's my best advice for you, because you want to yearbook these moments, and believe me, your children are going to cherish these 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. So that's my advice. Take a picture, write down a few reflections, share it with your child the day they leave the house.
Rolling.
Okay, final thought that I want to leave you guys with, and it's probably one of the most important things I'll share with you, and it's this. Remember that you've got 18 summers. The stats are in there to show that the amount of time we spend with our children through those 18 summers to when they leave the house is staggering. We're talking over 85% of the estimated quality time, moments with our kids since they go off and have their own life, happen in those first 18 summers. So I always encourage you, which a mentor did to me, check on those 18 summers. Do the math. How many do you have left? And take hold of these moments. Set these rhythms. Start doing the board meetings now. Remember, it's a positive push for you. You only have 18 summers. And if those 18 summers have passed for you, you can still plug in to these principles to make the most of the time that you still have with your kids. And if you are still within these 18 summers, like with me, I know right off the top of my head, I have 16 with Sammy, I have 14 with Maggie, I have 3 with Alden, and I have 5 with Leland. I know these right off the top of my head. And what it does, it helps keep them in priority. It helps me wanting to stay connected with them and make the most of this time. So remember, count with each one of your kids. Do it with your spouse. You only have 18 summers. Do the math. Make the most. Follow these principles, and you're never going to regret it. Remember the lesson I taught you about Steve Jobs. Steve didn't even get 18 summers with his family being a billionaire. And what he said was, these people that are in my life, my family, are 10,000 times better than anything I've ever done. I think you're going to see the same thing. And as I said before, we can all die a richer man than Steve Jobs just by putting these into practice. So remember, you've got 18 summers. Make the most of it.